So why was this week so important?
You know, there have been a lot of important victories in the struggle for equality for lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, and transgender people. We've managed to get rid of all of the laws that criminalize sexual intimacy between consenting adults. We got rid of constitutional amendments that barred the adoption of anti-discrimination laws protecting us. But we've never had a week like this, a week of one victory after another, of incredible forward momentum, and it's just was amazing. It felt like we were moving at the speed of light, and it's been incredibly exciting. On Sunday, we were in a situation where same-sex couples had the freedom to marry in 19 states and the District of Columbia. And woke up Monday morning, along with a lot of other people, to see if the Supreme Court was going to take any action with respect to requests that it hear appeals by 5 different states of federal courts of appeal rulings that their state marriage bans were unconstitutional.
And what were those 5 states?
That was Indiana, Oklahoma, Utah, Virginia, and Wisconsin. The prevailing wisdom was that the Supreme Court was going to probably hold the requests that it grant review in those 5 cases till later in the term, to wait and see if any courts of appeal ended up disagreeing with the virtual unanimity of the federal courts since the decision last June in the Windsor case that the core of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act was unconstitutional. Since that ruling, we have won more than 40 decisions from federal and state courts that bars on marriage equality are unconstitutional. It was already pretty remarkable that we were having victory after victory after victory in the lower courts, but what totally surprised almost everyone was what the Supreme Court did on Monday was to say that it was not going to review those Court of Appeal decisions from the 4th Circuit, the 7th Circuit, and the 10th Circuit. When it said not granting review, very quickly the courts in those circuits issued what's called a mandate, which is an order that makes their decision final. And as a result of that, we went on Monday from 19 states in the District of Columbia where same-sex couples could marry to 24 states and the District of Columbia. And what people understood was it was not going to be only those 5 states that were going to be affected, but since these were Court of Appeal rulings, those decisions that it is unconstitutional to bar same-sex couples from marrying were going to apply to other states within those circuits. And so we expected things to start happening pretty quickly. But they happened even more quickly than that, because on Tuesday, the 9th Circuit issued its decision in Lambda Legal's case in Nevada, along with National Center for Lesbian Rights case in Idaho. And the court struck down those constitutional bars, and that was incredibly exciting. I've been working on the Nevada case from the inception, and we had lost at the trial court. That was one of the losses before the Windsor decision came down. And so that was very exciting, but then even more surprising was that normally it takes 21 days before a Court of Appeal issues its mandate, before it makes the decision final. And what the 9th Circuit did at the end of the day on Tuesday was it issued its mandate immediately. And that, again, was a surprise to many people that that would happen. Meanwhile, during the day on Tuesday, the state of Colorado, recognizing that it was bound by the 10th Circuit's ruling in the cases from Utah and Oklahoma, went to the court and said, "We think this is over. Would you please remove the stay that existed on our case?" And couples became able to get married in Colorado. So we moved that day actually to 25 states. On Wednesday, I woke up to find that the governor of Idaho had asked the U.S. Supreme Court to tell the 9th Circuit that it acted too quickly. and to basically recall the mandate, to put things on hold. And Justice Kennedy put on a temporary hold while he decided what to do on a longer-term basis. But we were really surprised that his order referenced the case number for Nevada as well as the case numbers for Idaho, which would mean that instead of the Nevada decision becoming effective immediately, which we thought was going to happen on Wednesday, the clerk in Las Vegas had announced that couples would be able to start getting married at on Wednesday, would be able to start getting married at 2 o'clock that day. Instead, there was this order suddenly that applied to Nevada as well, it looked like. We called the clerk's office of the Supreme Court to say, was that what the court really intended to do? Because there was no request that anything be done with respect to Nevada. It was only a request as to Idaho. And a few hours later, Justice Kennedy issued a corrective order saying that on further reflection, he believed that his order should only apply to Idaho and not to Nevada. So then we were jubilant because it looked like our clients in Nevada would be able to start getting married. But what then happened later in the day on Wednesday is that our opponent, the Coalition for the Protection of Marriage, which were the proponents of the constitutional amendment that went on the ballot in Nevada, went back to the Supreme Court and asked for the stay order to apply to Nevada as well, and also went to the Ninth Circuit and asked it to recall the mandate as to Nevada and issue a stay. And Wednesday night, we worked preparing responses which were due to the Supreme Court at 5 p.m. on Thursday Eastern Time and to the Ninth Circuit at 5 p.m. Pacific Time. And so we had 2 briefs to prepare. I got up very early Thursday morning to help finalize those briefs, and we were essentially done with them when we received notice that the proponent of the constitutional amendment had second thoughts and withdrew both of those motions. So we ended up not having to file those briefs. That was fine in the sense that, well, it meant we won, because the governor and attorney general and all of the other defendants, the government defendants that we had sued in Nevada, had conceded that the Nevada law could not meet the heightened judicial scrutiny that the Ninth Circuit had decided previously applies when the government discriminates based on sexual orientation. So, so then the issue was, well, would the clerk's office, which had put things on hold when the Supreme Court initially issued its order and was like saying, well, it's confusing now, we're not sure what to do, would they begin to allow same-sex couples to marry? And we did everything we could to try to make that happen. The Ninth Circuit issued a new order saying, we're just confirming that there is no recall of the mandate as to Nevada, there is no stay, and the judge who had originally ruled against us at the district court ended up recusing himself, that is, taking himself off the case rather than sign the injunction that he'd been ordered to sign, and the case got reassigned to a different judge. So we ended up placing phone calls to that judge's chambers. We understand that the governor and the attorney general were placing phone calls to the judge's chambers. There were many people trying to say, all right, there's nothing more to wait for. And while we were waiting, word came that the government officials in West Virginia, where Orlando Legal also had a case going on, had conceded that they too were bound by the ruling from the Fourth Circuit in the case that we and the ACLU had gotten involved in Virginia, and that same-sex couples could get married in West Virginia. And our lead plaintiffs in our West Virginia case got married on Thursday afternoon.
Yay!
Yay! Around 5 o'clock, word finally came that the judge had signed the injunction in Nevada, and the clerk's office started allowing same-sex couples to get marriage licenses. And the first one to get a marriage license in Las Vegas were two of our clients in our Nevada case, and that was thrilling to see how happy they were and how jubilant really everyone was. So by the end of the day Thursday, we were up to 27 states. Meanwhile, in the Idaho case, the National Center for Lesbian Rights filed a brief with the Supreme Court urging them to not extend the stay there, which brought us to Friday. On Friday, the government authorities in North Carolina announced that they agreed that they too were bound by the decision from the Fourth Circuit, from the Virginia case, and same-sex couples began to get married in North Carolina. Later in the afternoon, the Supreme Court announced that Justice Kennedy had referred the stay request from Idaho to the full court, and they had decided to not extend the stay, making it possible for same-sex couples to start getting married in Idaho. There's still an effort by the other side to try to get the Ninth Circuit to keep this from going into effect. I'm positive that that is not going to succeed. So really where we are now is 29 states and the District of Columbia where same-sex couples are either able to marry or will be very, very, very shortly. So
started off
remarkable.
With 19, and now we're at 29.
Yeah, so
that was
10 states in the course of a week. So where we are now is we're still waiting to hear from the 6 additional states that are within the circuits now that have decided that it is unconstitutional to deny same-sex couples the right to marry. That's Alaska, where there actually were arguments previously scheduled that took place on Friday. Arizona, where Land Illegal also has a case where we got an injunction requiring recognition of a marriage that was entered in another state, and where the judge asked for some additional briefing by next week as to whether or not, as he said it appears, the decision has been made that Arizona is going to have to comply as well. And then Kansas, Montana, South Carolina, and Wyoming.
So a lot of really conservative states.
If you had told me that, at this point, just even last year, that at this point where we would be is that same-sex couples would have the right to marry in Utah, in Oklahoma, in West Virginia, in Virginia and North Carolina, and parts of the South and the kind of Midwest and Rocky Mountain Rust Belt states, I would not have believed it. It's very, conservative still. I mean, I think changing, but on issues related to LGBT rights, but still pretty conservative. And states where constitutional amendments passed by sometimes over 70% of the voters. So I expect that pretty soon we'll be up to 35 states and the District of Columbia.
Solely based on...
Just based on the rulings so far.
Mm-hmm.
We're waiting for a ruling from the Sixth Circuit governing a case that Lambda has in Ohio, as well as cases in Kentucky, Tennessee, and Michigan. That's already been argued, and so we're just waiting for a decision. There's going to be arguments in two cases in the Fifth Circuit, one from Texas, one from Louisiana, where Lambda Legal's recently become involved in that case. So those will take place next month. There's a case that's now pending before the 11th Circuit from Florida that the ACLU brought. And then the remaining circuit, the 8th Circuit, there's a number of cases at the district courts. But right now, there's litigation in every remaining state that does not yet provide marriage equality.
So that's 15 states.
Correct. I think, the prevailing wisdom was, the Supreme Court's going to have to take a case. And I think a lot of people now believe that, well, they're only going to take a case if it goes the other way.
I've read somewhere that now the majority of all Americans live in a state where marriage equality is the law. Is that true?
That is correct. And again, that's a remarkable change. And I think one of the other things that's really quite amazing is it's now easier to count the states that don't provide marriage equality than the states that do. And that's just a sign of how things have changed. It's not over yet. We still have to get from, these steps from having 29 states to having 50 states and all the territories. We have a case in Puerto Rico as well right now. There's a lot of other battles as well, besides winning marriage equality. What many people not only don't realize, but even can't quite believe, is that there are still 21 states that don't have laws expressly barring discrimination based on sexual orientation. And we still don't have a federal law that explicitly does that.
I know Lambda receives a lot of calls from people who feel they've experienced discrimination. Do you think that that's something that happens to people?
Unfortunately, it still does. And unfortunately, remarkably, it's sometimes quite blatant. It's you're gay. I don't want anyone gay working here. You're fired. And so it is still a problem. And I think many people would have thought we would have won that battle before winning marriage, because there's widespread public opinion that it should be illegal. Really an overwhelming majority of Americans believe that. But that's not the only thing. There's a wide span of issues affecting transgender people in this country. The level of violence and murders against transgender people, particularly transgender women of color, is truly shocking. The level of hatred and harassment and really horrible violence is shocking. And actually, it's 29 states with no sexual orientation anti-discrimination laws. For gender identity anti-discrimination laws, it's actually 31 states with no protections. So that's and it is quite a problem for transgender people who really experience quite rampant employment discrimination, much higher levels than lesbians, gay men, or bisexuals. But there are other issues about access to health care. There's still a lot of issues dealing with HIV and how people with HIV are treated in this country. There's still, the marriage issue may help a lot on the parenting issues, but there are still numerous states where same-sex couples cannot do joint adoptions or second-parent adoptions and are discriminated against in custody proceedings. There are issues respecting youth being bullied and harassed and subjected to violence in schools, youth being mistreated in the foster care system, juvenile justice system, very high rates of homelessness among LGBT youth. There are problems facing LGBT seniors. There are still quite serious problems in our criminal justice system, and one of the things that we're increasingly focusing on is the ways in which sexual orientation and gender identity and HIV discrimination intersect and combine and may reinforce or have combination effects for LGBT people of color, low-income LGBT people, LGBT immigrants. I guess what I'd like to say is the progress that we've made is progress that's been a long time coming. The first marriage cases were brought in the 1970s in the United States. They all lost pretty quickly. The modern day battle for marriage equality started about 20 years ago in Hawaii, but it didn't just happen overnight, and it was the result of a lot of hard work by a lot of incredibly dedicated and relentless advocates, not just from Lambda Legal, but also from our colleagues at the ACLU, Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, Freedom to Marry, many people and organizations who have been a part of making this happen. And I'm grateful to all of them. and for all of the people who just took the courageous step of coming out. I mean, it's great to be talking about this today on National Coming Out Day, because I really believe that more than anything else, actually, it was those people putting themselves out there and sharing with others who they are, to let people know that they actually know people who they care about, who are being hurt by these discriminatory laws. That nothing else works as well to break down stereotypes and misconceptions. One of the things that's been wonderful is seeing all of the photos and videos of same-sex couples getting married and waiting in line or telling their stories, because you see the actual incredible diversity of our community. You see people who don't look like the gay people that are featured in movies and on TV. You see an incredible array of shapes and colors and ages, and it's just beautiful. It's all beautiful, and that more than anything else, I think, has helped bring this seemingly rapid change to our country. And I just would say I feel very privileged to be able to do this work, and to be a part of this movement for justice. And it's been a thrilling week, and certainly one that I will never forget.